This is All 24 News World News Program Midnight Edition, and these are today's top stories. President Thabboune arrives in Qatar to attend the opening ceremony of the 2022 World Cup held on Sunday in Doha at the invitation of Qatari Emir, His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. Also coming up, FIFA president hits back at World Cup critics with shocking diatribe. And at COP27, divisions and splits threaten deal to tackle climate crisis, and world's poorest countries denounce rich for delaying action and refusing financial assistance to those suffering extreme weather. Also in our news, Elon Musk launches Twitter poll about reinstating Donald Trump's account. Hello again, I'm Karim Zachary and welcome to the program. First in our news, as seen in the headlines, President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, arrived on Saturday in Qatar to attend the opening ceremony of the 2022 World Cup held on Sunday in Doha. His Highness Sheikh Abdullah bin Hamad Al Thani, Deputy Emir of Qatar, received President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, at Hamad International Airport in Doha. The Algerian President was invited by his brother, Qatari Emir, His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. And speaking of World Cup, thousands of excited fans from all around the world poured to Qatar to support their national teams as one day left before the start of the World Cup that is hosted by Qatar and looms to be the best World Cup in football history. Meanwhile, FIFA President Gianni Infantino accused critics of Qatar's treatment of migrant workers of hypocrisy, adding that engagement was the only way to improve human rights.
What is sad is that, especially in the last weeks, we have been assisting in some places, a real lesson of moral, of double moral, I would say. So let's start with the migrant workers, if you allow me. We are told many, many lessons from some Europeans, from the Western world. I'm European. Actually, I am European. Not just I feel European. I think for what we Europeans have been doing in the last 3,000 years around the world, we should be apologizing for the next 3,000 years before starting to give moral lessons.
Back to Algeria now. The President of the Republic of Cuba, Mr. Miguel Díaz-Canel Bermudez, ended on Saturday a working and friendship visit of 3 days in Algeria. Mr. Díaz-Canel Bermudez was greeted on his departure from the international airport, Houari Boumediene of Algiers, by the Prime Minister, Mr. Ayman bin Abdurrahman, and members of the Algerian government. To Western Sahara file now, the Frente Polisario stressed that it was unrealistic to talk about a political process under the catastrophic conditions in the occupied Saharan territories. Member of the National Secretariat of the Frente, Obi Bashraya al-Bashir, said that Morocco's occupation policy aims at isolating the occupied Western Sahara territories from the outside world.
Continuing to talk about the resumption of the political process under catastrophic conditions such as those prevailing in the occupied Saharan territories is not only unrealistic but also mockery. The Moroccan occupation's policy is to isolate the territory from the outside world, as well as to persecute civilians in order to prevent them from recounting the facts, as well as to empty the area of its indigenous population.
Algeria's permanent representative to the United Nations, Mr. Nadir Al-Arabawi, stressed before the United Nations General Assembly on the need to address the historical injustice that the African continent was subjected to in the formation of the Security Council. This came during an intervention by Ambassador Al-Arabawi before the General Assembly in the general debate on the issue of equitable representation in the Security Council and increasing the number of its members, in addition to other issues related to the Security Council.
The current events and conditions of the political and geopolitical realities which the international scene is witnessing impose on all of us a general reform of the Security Council, seeing that the previous governmental negotiations highlighted the realization and admission of all member countries of the aspirations of the African countries to deal with the historic injustice that the African countries have witnessed, seeing that Africa has dropped from the international decision-making, even for the issues that concern the region and its affairs. It is high time for the international group to solve this continuous injustice to allow the African continent to perform its important role on the international level, especially in what concerns the allotment of permanent seats in the Security Council, and this is through expanding the African existence and implementation.
To Spain now. Spanish security forces were able to dismantle a criminal network headed by two Moroccans. The criminal network was one of the biggest suppliers of drugs to criminal organizations in Spain and other European nations. This is the second phase of the significant operation Spain is leading to combat drug trafficking and money laundering. To neighboring Morocco, port professionals in Morocco continue their strike across all the country's ports in an escalatory measure to demand that the Ahnouch government review and cap fuel prices, as well as the rehabilitation of the fishing sector. The strikers also expressed their dissatisfaction with the non-serious handling of the Moroccan Ministry of Fisheries regarding the preoccupations and their professional conditions, which were described as miserable.
6 million people are suspended from work. The fishing sector doesn't only include fishermen, but there are sellers, transporters and other groups that mainly depend on fishing. The market will be affected by the current strike, and the prices will actually rise. The repercussions of the strike affect the entire Moroccan economy, and it's reasonable for professionals to continue calling to save the sector.
To Asia now, Bangkok Asia-Pacific leaders added their voices on Saturday to international pressure on Russia over its invasion of Ukraine, issuing a summit statement saying most of them condemned the war. The 21 members of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum issued a joint declaration after a day and a half of talks in Bangkok, criticizing the conflict and global economic turmoil it has unleashed. Usama Ayadi with the details.
Leaders of the 21-member APEC bloc pledged on Saturday to boost trade and do more to tackle other economic challenges, wrapping up the last of 3 summits that have been overshadowed by intense geopolitical rivalry. The summits have been attended by global leaders, and the talks have often been disrupted by friction spilling over from the war in Ukraine, as well as flashpoints such as Taiwan Strait and the Korean Peninsula.
We have discussed the topics of nuclear weapons at the summit. Thailand, as the APEC host and myself included, are concerned about this.
Chinese President Xi Jinping met with Thai Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha to discuss a range of issues to enhance relations. The leaders of the member countries discussed various topics including security, economic cooperation, building more connectivity between the people of all countries, and tackling poverty. All sides also touched upon the issues of cybercrime, transnational crime, and human trafficking.
We have a years-long plan to continue talks on the free trade area of the Asia-Pacific to prepare for new trade cooperation and investments after the COVID-19 era.
Japan's presence in the summit was concluded by decisions to strengthen the country's defense capabilities amid rising tensions in regional security, with promises to establish a new national security strategy and other measures by the end of the year.
We will firmly strengthen the deterrence and coping capabilities of the Japan-US alliance, and we will promote efforts to realize a free and open Indo-Pacific region in cooperation with the related countries and regional partners.
The earlier meetings were dominated by the war in Ukraine, as well as tensions over Taiwan and the Korean Peninsula. A North Korea missile launch on Saturday also brought condemnation and calls for calm, as well as the condemnation of the war in Ukraine.
And speaking of the war in Ukraine, Britain's new Prime Minister Rishi Sunak made his first visit to Kiev on Saturday, pledging to continue the firm support for Ukraine that was a focus of his predecessors and providing a new air defense package to help shoot down Russian drones. During the visit, Sunak said that Britain would provide new air defense support, including 120 anti-aircraft guns, radar, and anti-drone equipment. The Prime Minister said Britain would also increase the training it provides to Ukraine's armed forces.
This year alone, we have provided £2.3 billion of military support, and we will do the same again next year. As you succeed in pushing back Russian forces on the ground, your homes, your hospitals, your power stations are being destroyed by the air. So to help you defend yourselves, we are today providing new air defense support, including 120 anti-aircraft guns, radar, and anti-drone equipment. We're extending our training for the Ukrainian armed forces to include specialist expertise from UK medics and engineers. And we are stepping up our support to help you through the cold, hard winter ahead. This includes winter kit for your troops, help for your amazing first responders, and another £16 million of humanitarian assistance for food and shelter.
Global warming continues to be a matter of serious thought as the work of the Global Climatic Conference of the Parties in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, ended on Saturday, with deep differences to formulate the final statement in light of outstanding issues, foremost of which is the establishment of new fund to help vulnerable countries. Zahra Farjani reports.
This year's climate conference in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, ended with an arising question. Is COP27 summit of discord in view of the differences within the meeting? The salvation of the conference will depend in particular on whether or not the agreement is ratified on the issue of climate damage suffered by poor and vulnerable countries. The countries of the South demand the creation of specific funds dedicated to the losses caused by polluting countries, while the latter procrastinate on the amounts allocated to the fund.
The last 2 weeks, I have been following closely the consultations and discussions that have been underway between the parties on the contentious issues that needed further consultations and efforts to reach a consensus, primarily the issue of loss and damage, the mitigation work program, the global goal and adaptation.
European Commission Vice President expressed his disappointment at the paralysis that characterized the summit, going so far as to mention a possible withdrawal from the summit if no convincing results were to emerge.
But we don't want a result at any price. We will not accept a result if it takes us back. We need to move forward, not backwards. We need to move forward, not backwards. And all ministers, as they have told me, like myself, are prepared to walk away if we do not have a result that does justice to what the world is waiting for, namely that we do something about this climate crisis.
The fact remains that the current commitments are still below the objectives recommended by scientists who are constantly sounding the alarm. According to the UN, current measures will at best limit global warming to 2.4 degrees, far from 1.5 degrees so often mentioned.
Malaysians rushed to poll stations to vote to elect representatives who will form the next government with hopes for change, to end years of political instability that frustrated citizens who believe it has taken politicians' focus off slowing economic growth and rising inflation in the Southeast Asian nation.
Because I think we're going to get a new government, inshallah, again. So let's wait and see. Yeah, I'm very confident that Malaysians will go out and vote today, and then we'll definitely get a new government.
Still in Malaysia, Malaysia's veteran leader, Mahathir Mohamad, suffered his first election defeat in 53 years on Saturday in a blow that could mark the end of a 7-decade political career. The details in this report.
Former Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad has lost his parliamentary seat in Saturday's general elections, likely ending the career of one of Asia's most enduring politicians. Mahathir came in fourth in a 5-way fight in his long-held constituency in the holiday resort island of Langkawi. The country's election commission said on Saturday it was the 97-year-old's first electoral defeat in more than a half a century.
My last election, I didn't want to contest this time.
He served as Malaysia's prime minister for 22 years, from 1981 to 2003. He returned to politics 2 years ago in the wake of the multi-billion-dollar scandal at a state fund. Mahathir held the Guinness World Record for being the world's oldest current prime minister when he became prime minister in 2018, just 2 months shy of his 93rd birthday. Mahathir has been criticized for ruling the Southeast Asian nation with an iron fist from 1981 to 2003, but he is also hailed for helping transform the country from a sleepy backwater into one of the world's top exporters of high-tech goods. His long leadership provided political stability, and he gained title of Father of Modern Malaysia as he oversaw the construction of highways and industrial parks in the 1980s and the 1990s.
Following the announcement of Attorney General Merrick Garland to name prosecutor Jack Smith as a special counsel to oversee the DOJ investigation of former President Donald Trump, the latter claims innocence over the appointment and called it a new witch hunt. Islam Sid has the story.
Trump woes show no end as U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland has named Jack Smith, a war crime prosecutor, as a special counsel to handle Justice Department investigations into Trump's involvement in major cases of handling classified documents in his Mar-a-Lago house and the aftermath of the 2020 elections, which prompted former president's backers to storm the U.S. Capitol on January 6th of the same year. In a statement, Prosecutor Smith immediately promised to act quickly, independently, and thoroughly. Garland's announcement came 3 days after Trump announced he would run for president again in 2024. According to Garland, Trump's announcement of his presidential candidacy and President Joe Biden, who stated his intention to run for re-elections, were key factors in his decision to appoint Jack Smith. It's a new witch hunt. This is what former U.S. President Donald Trump said during his speech on Friday night, claiming his innocence and denouncing justice, which he said is politicized, and described the special prosecutor appointment a rigged deal. The White House, on the other hand, has denied knowing in advance that U.S. Attorney General created a special counsel, stating that Biden administration would not politicize Justice Department. Members of Congress may still have concerns about the selection of a special counsel. Garland has repeatedly stated his intention to bring back the political independence of the Justice Department after the turbulent years of the Trump administration, as well as his singular focus on the facts, the evidence, and the law in the department's decision-making.
Elon Musk dropped a 24-hour poll on his own Twitter feed Friday night, asking whether or not to reinstate former President Trump to the social media platform. Since he took over the company, there's been a lot of interest in whether or not Musk would allow Trump to return to Twitter after nearly a 2-year absence. Musk's new Twitter poll had a simple yes or no vote on whether to reinstate former President Trump. By Saturday morning, the vote total neared 11.6 million votes, with about 52% in favor of reinstating and 48% against. A historic snowstorm is slamming western New York City Saturday, with more than 6 feet of snow in some places, closing roads, triggering driving bans, and canceling flights the weekend before the Thanksgiving holiday. Another round of heavy lake-effect snowfall is expected to return to the Buffalo area Saturday night, according to the National Weather Service, with most of the heavy snow bands falling over Lake Ontario, north of Metro Buffalo, on Saturday afternoon.
Which car should I start with?
Some 80,000 people marched between Place de la République and Place de la Nation to denounce the dysfunctions of the justice in the fight against sexist and sexual violence. France has been reporting high numbers of violence against women, as many protests have taken place in the country for 5 years, and the number of rapes has exceeded 49,000 during the last 5 years, or 94,000 during the last 5 years.
Every year, we bring out the same sign, and we don't have to do it again. So I think it proves we've been using the same signs for 5 years. So I think it really shows that no, clearly there is everything that is still to be done, and that the politicians do not take hold of the subject. In any case, not enough.
And in our other topical news, 5 suspects have been indicated in Bulgaria after the November 13th attack in Istanbul, attributed by the authorities to Kurdish PKK fighters and their allies in Syria. 5 people have been charged for having helped one of the alleged perpetrators of the attack to flee. However, 2 others were reported to be Syrian Kurds, and this concerns a woman and a 31-year-old man named Amran Abdurrahmi, who appears to be the main suspect. And for more international news, let's follow this report compiled to us by our own Sofian Kantouri.
North Korean state news agency released new images of the country's latest missile launch early Saturday, saying that the massive missile was fired on Friday, 18th November 2022. State media photos showed Kim walking hand in hand with his daughter and watching together the huge missile loaded on a launch truck. It's the first time for North Korea to publish the photo of Kim's daughter. Beijing residents stood in long lines at COVID-19 test stations on Saturday as authorities in Chinese capital urged people to stay home during the weekend amid rising cases and fears of community spread. Nepal will hold general elections on November 20th. Rising inflation, higher fuel prices has given rise to some concerns and pushed residents to run to the polls. Nepalese will choose their 275 members of the House of Representatives in the elections. From several kilometers away, the emergency ministry said in a written comment that the explosion was caused by gas pipe decompression. No casualties so far have been reported.
Back to Algeria now. In its 3rd edition this year, Algerian Scholar Award Foundation honored 3 Algerian scholars who outstood with their inventions and stories or theories, which served and honored Algeria in international forums. The attendees of this event watched introductory videos of the 3 honored scholars, in addition to listening to their seminars.
Our future is the Algerian youth. The state grants them possibilities and facilitates all their steps to achieve their dreams.
A state without youth does not exist, so young people must trust themselves and their role in building Algeria, and God willing, they will reach all their ambitions and more. Now the Algerian institutions are following the same path, setting up programs that focus on the problems of the Algerian society.
Still in Algeria, the Abimidian Algeria-Palestine Brotherhood Forum organized in the capital Algiers a festival of solidarity with the Palestinian people under the name From Al-Awras to Al-Quds, with the participation of leaders from various Palestinian factions. The festival, which came as part of the commemoration of the 68th anniversary of the Algerian Liberation Revolution, comes as part of Algeria's efforts to implement the Declaration of Reunification in support of justice of the Palestinian cause. The participants appreciated the role played by Algeria in supporting Al-Aqsa and the Palestinian resistance.
One of the objectives of this activity and what follows is to support the efforts made by Algeria to serve this cause after its success in achieving Palestinian unification and reaching the outcomes of Algiers Declaration, which we hope that God will facilitate its implementation, and also after the success of the Arab Summit, which centralized Palestine as the most important issue. All this thanks to the kind endeavor made by Algeria.
And with this, ladies and gentlemen, we conclude our news bulletin. For more stories, do visit our social media platforms as well as our website. Thank you for tuning in, and bye for now.